Nobody at the HFY court ever asked what I did before the treaty. They just looked at my hands, no calluses from a blade, no burn scars from a plasma coil, and decided I was what the peace papers called me, a placeholder husband, a human body standing next to a queen, so the war would stop for one more season. I let them believe it. 5 years is a long time to keep a secret, and I'd had practice long before I ever set foot on a HFY stone. Queen Ythmara Sel never mocked me herself. She was too careful for that, too aware of what her generals whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. But she let it happen. She let Warlord Kaskin Dree call me the consort in that flat, dismissive tone every council morning, let the guards trade looks when I fumbled a ceremonial blade I could have field-stripped blind. I think she believed, same as everyone else, that the treaty had handed her a soft, ordinary man to keep her bed warm and her enemies calm. I never corrected her. Some silences you keep because they're easier than the truth. Mine, I kept because the truth had a body count I didn't want in her eyes. There were small tells, if anyone had cared to look. The way I always chose the seat with a clear line to the door, the way I flinched, just barely, at the concussive echo of the terrace cannons during drills, not from fear, but from old muscle memory sorting the sound into categories: incoming, outgoing, safe. Nobody looked. It's easy to become invisible when everyone has already decided what kind of man you are. The Syndral remnant broke the ceasefire on the 91st day of spring, while half of Kesh Vantor's lower terraces were packed with refugees waiting on evacuation transports that were still 3 hours out. I was standing on the seawall with a tray of ration bars, doing what everyone expected of me, handing out bread while real men held the line, when the first breach charge took out the eastern gate. Below me, the lower terraces were a slow-moving river of families, children carried on shoulders, elders leaning on whoever was nearest, all of them funneling toward transports that hadn't arrived yet. I remember thinking, with a strange, distant clarity, that I knew exactly how many minutes a crowd that size needed to clear a kill zone, and exactly how few minutes we had left to give them. Kaskin's voice came over the comm, ragged. Second wall's failing. Get the queen below. I found her on the command platform, staring at the smoke rolling up from the terraces, one hand pressed flat against her sternum, like she could hold the fear in that way. Her guard captain was down. Her generals were scattered along a collapsing perimeter. And 30 Syndral raiders were coming up the cliff stair with intent to make an example of her in front of every refugee still waiting to be saved. Ythmara. I said it plain, no title, which I never did in front of anyone. I need you to trust me for the next 4 minutes. She looked at me the way she'd look at a servant who'd suddenly started speaking a dead language. Elias, you can't. I can. I was already moving, already stripping the ceremonial sash that had never once fooled me into thinking it was armor. Underneath it, where nobody bothered to look because nobody expected a placeholder husband to need it, was the field kit I'd kept quiet for 5 years. Stay behind the rampart line. Whatever you hear, don't come around it. I want to tell you it felt like putting on an old coat. It didn't. It felt like waking something up that I'd spent 5 years trying to let sleep. The part of me that had spent a decade in the Kestrel Reclamation Corps, pulling burning children out of collapsed shelters and putting down the men who'd lit the fires. I hadn't touched that part of myself since the day I signed the treaty and told the recruiters I was done. I'd wanted to be done. The Syndral raiders came up over the rampart in a loose wedge, expecting an empty command platform and an unarmed foreign consort standing between them and a queen. What they found instead was a man they'd never bothered to file a report on, because nobody on either side of this war had thought to ask who I used to be. I won't dress up what happened on that platform. It wasn't clean and it wasn't fast, but it was over in under 4 minutes, the way I'd told her it would be, and when it was over, I was standing in front of the rampart with my hands shaking, not from fear, from the old familiar come down, and 11 raiders were down, and the rest had broken and run for the stair. Warlord Kaskin arrived with the relief squad 40 seconds too late to matter, and stopped dead at the top of the ramp. He didn't say anything at first. None of them did. They just looked at the platform, then at me, then at the queen stepping out from behind the rampart line with her hand still pressed to her chest, staring at me, like she was seeing an entirely different man standing in my boots. Consort, Kaskin said finally, and the word had lost every ounce of the flatness he usually poured into it. "Elias," I said. "Just Elias." Nobody laughed. Nobody had it in them to. It was one of the younger soldiers, a scout barely out of training, blood on her sleeve from someone else's wound, who said it first. Quiet, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. He fought like something out of the old war songs, like a fallen star came down onto this platform. She didn't mean it as flattery. She meant it the way you say a thing you've just watched happen and don't have better words for yet. Ithmara crossed the platform slowly, past soldiers who were, one by one, dropping to a knee, not because anyone ordered them to, but because none of them knew what else to do in front of a man they'd spent 5 years underestimating. She didn't kneel. She stood in front of me instead, close enough that I could see the wet shine building in her eyes that she was too proud to let fall. 5 years, she said. You let me believe you were nothing. I let everyone believe that, I said. It was safer for both of us. A queen married to a soldier is a queen at war twice, once with her enemies, once with her own court, wondering what he's for. A queen married to nothing is just a queen keeping the peace. I don't want a nothing, she said, and her voice broke on it in a way I'd never once heard in 5 years of council chambers and diplomatic dinners. I never wanted a nothing, Elias. I wanted someone who'd still be standing when it mattered. I just didn't know I already had one. Behind her, Kaskin finally found his voice again, rough with something that sounded almost like an apology he didn't know how to phrase. The consort held the platform alone. Get the medics up here, and somebody find out what he actually is. A retired man, I told him, who forgot how tired he wanted to be. They evacuated the terraces 2 hours later, every refugee transport loaded and gone, before the second Syndral wave ever reached the outer wall. Because the wall held, because word had already spread down through the ranks about what had happened on the command platform, and men fight differently when they believe something impossible is standing behind them. Ithmara found me afterward on the seawall, in the dark, where I'd gone because I didn't know how to be looked at the way the whole garrison was suddenly looking at me. She didn't say anything about generals or titles or 5 years of silence. She just sat down beside me on the cold stone, shoulder to shoulder, and watched the transport lights fade out over the black water with me. They're calling you the fallen star, she said eventually. They'll stop, eventually. I hope they don't. She was quiet a moment, watching the last light disappear. I spent 5 years thinking I'd married the least of what this treaty could have given me. I was wrong about a lot of things, Elias, but I was never more wrong than that. I didn't have a clean answer for her, not that night. I just reached over, the way I hadn't let myself do in 5 years of careful distance, and let my hand rest over hers on the cold stone. She didn't pull away, neither did I. The court still calls me the consort, out of habit more than anything now, but nobody says it flat anymore. And when the new recruits ask the older soldiers what happened on the command platform that night, they don't tell it like a rumor. They tell it like something they were lucky enough to have seen with their own eyes. Ithmara asked me once, months later, whether I regretted the silence. I told her no, that the man who'd walked into her court as a placeholder husband had needed those quiet years as much as she had, both of us circling something neither was ready to name. What I regretted was every dinner spent pretending I hadn't noticed her watching me, like she was solving a puzzle she'd stopped believing had an answer. She still keeps a seat open for me at the head table, with a clear line to the door. She never asked why I preferred it. She just started doing it, quietly. The same season the whole garrison stopped calling me nothing,